I had no idea that I'd be given this kind of opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it. And you for showing up so faithfully, all 3 episodes, I guess we should say. Just turned out there was a lot more as I began to put all this together. It's hard to encapsulate so much in such a small amount of time. And so I think we're actually doing pretty good narrowing it down to 3, but I've got quite a lot of material I want to show you tonight. It's almost going to all be annotating and narrating out of necessity presentation via PowerPoint. And the reason is there's just quite a lot of news coverage and data points I want to share with you that's going to kind of bring together everything we've been talking about for the past, month and a half, 2 months now, but two sessions prior to tonight. I promised you that what we would finally end up doing is sort of bringing together the aggregate of all the information we've talked about. We've had Econ 101 on week 1. We've had sort of a summation of how that applies to us on the ground in real time now in the second time we met. And tonight, I'd kind of like to show you in unfortunate detail where we are, bring some of the receipts to show you that these are not just random speculations I've made, and I don't make claims that I can't back up, or at least not as faithfully as possible. Also, I'd like to share maybe some of my opinion now as to what all this means, and it is opinion. I try to base my opinion on as many facts as I can, but as I've said a couple times in the last few weeks, the data that we get is so disparate from point to point that it's almost impossible to form a coherent whole with all that we have available to us right now. It is, I think, in some cases purposefully misleading and hard to understand and create an aggregate that makes sense to anybody. And the information we're being fed is like trying to fill a thimble with a fire hose right now, as evidenced by the fact that just in the week that's gone by since we met last Wednesday night, there is so much that has come out and happened, and trends that have emerged and shown themselves, statements that have been made by very important policymakers. I'm not going to say they're important people, but they're important policymakers, and they matter, because for better or worse, what they say tends to go. So that's kind of what I want to do tonight, and leave you with sort of an idea, vision, an image, a gestalt, a worldview that might be a little bit differently aligned from how it was before with regard to what we can kind of think about expecting coming up in the next, not years, but actually months, in my opinion. But before all that, let's do something kind of fun. I mentioned last week that there's a graphic that is really difficult to behold that indicates what $1 trillion looks like. A visual encapsulation of what it actually would look like if you were to have $1 trillion laying on the ground. So I'd like to start out by saying what does $1 trillion look like? We talk about it all the time. We hear politicians talking about $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there. Like I said last week, pretty soon you're talking real money. Well, here's the $100 bill. Guaranteed to make friends wherever they go. We've all seen them. It's it's the largest U.S. denomination right now in general circulation. If you're lucky enough to have one of those, you probably won't have it very long. A packet of these is only about a ½ inch thick, a little less than a ½ inch thick, and that's $10,000. Now that's good for, they say, a week or two, but that was a long time ago. Now it's an hour or two of shamefully decadent fun because of inflation. Now, this little pile here is anybody see Austin Powers? $1 million, which of course in 1960s was a lot of money. So that's just 100 packets of $10,000. You would not even notice if someone were carrying that around with them. $1 million. Now we're talking about kind of a little bit of money that you could fold and be respectable carrying around. $100 million is about a pallet of $100 bills. Now we're going to talk real money. Here's your $1 billion. Remember, these are all $100 bills. We're looking at 10 pallets of $100 bills. Now, next we're going to see $1 trillion. Ready? Here we go. This is the number they're all talking about. We're throwing this around like it's nothing really anymore. This is 1,000 billions. Ready? Here we go. Can you see? There's our little man. And they are they're double stacked. So they're about 8 feet tall. That's $1 trillion. Now this last picture is just sort of an added bonus to make you feel all warm and fuzzy and ensure that you sleep well tonight. So there you go. And we're told not to be concerned about this. By the way, what's shown is 22 trillion. This was, the graphic was done back when it was only 22 trillion, like a whole year and a half ago. And since then, we've of course added $6 trillion additional dollars to it, thanks to our response to COVID. Not thanks to COVID, thanks to our response to COVID. So I just wanted to share that with you real quick. I tried to explain it to you last week, and it's really hard to imagine unless you're actually looking at that graphic. So, one other point I made last week that I spoke with somebody about on Sunday, it may have been you, that I don't remember, but I made the point that economics is a force of nature. Economics is not something we invented. Economics is something we discovered. Was that a conversation we had? I can't remember who it was that I talked to about it after Sunday, but they wanted, okay, yeah, fair enough, thank you. We didn't invent electricity. We discovered it, and then we were through painful trial and error able to use it and harness its powers, for good or evil. And we've seen it used in both ways. Same with gravity. Gravity, happily for us, keeps us from flying off the surface of the planet, but if you fall off of a building, it hurts real bad. So these are forces of nature that we can capitalize on. We can leverage the properties of these forces, and they can help our lives or they can make our lives miserable. Economics is no different from either of these, but I would argue that it's infinitely more a powerful force of the universe than either of these or any of the other forces that we've discovered, even combined, because economics is the universe's search for balance, for equilibrium, for its normative, positive state of being to where all things are at rest, and it will spare no one to get to that point. It doesn't have a conscience. It does what it does in order to find this place of rest. And every time we try to insert ourselves and engineer it in a way that it was never intended to be, just like Tucker Carlson said last week, nature wins. And it will do whatever it takes to win. So it's like I said, people are surprised to discover that this is not some man-made concept or construct, economics. Economics is simply the name we gave this force of the universe to find its balance, to understand that there is such a thing as opportunity costs and trade-offs and essential pursuit of self-interest, and the self can simply be nature itself, trying to find the point at which it is at rest. So I just wanted to reemphasize that for a second, because people are surprised when they begin to ponder the idea that economics is not this construct we created to serve our purposes. It's a discovery we've made, and we can harness it and use its properties for good or evil. Now, what's happening now? I'm going to make a few statements, and then I'm going to back them up with what we're going to talk about for the rest of the hour. What's happening right now is there is a deliberate attempt, not just in the United States, but globally. And we're going to concentrate mainly in the United States, although it's getting harder and harder to isolate ourselves from these forces through normative economics that are trying to change what is attempting to be its own positive economic scenario. But we've got this force that's trying to eliminate autonomy and free choice. Simply put, that is this force that we're encountering, this global movement that we're watching, is trying to reduce the importance of the individual and the individual's rights to make choices for itself. His or her, the ability to say I and act on behalf of I is being systematically eliminated. This, again, we're going to show here, and it is not an accident. Remember last week we talked a little bit about this apparent seeming movement to remove what we consider the benefits and virtue of work, right? And defining yourself by what you do, by what you create, by what you leave behind, by the change you make, the difference you make, the influence you have on people and your environment. This thing is being diminished. It is being reduced to almost pejorative, of a pejorative nature, to where if you are considered to be working, it is considered now more and more, day after day, to be a negative thing. Like, why would you be working when you can get free money by not working? These incentives, these perverse incentives that are being designed to keep people from working and therefore be dependent on something other than themselves. Remember, the reduction of autonomy and free choice all plays into this. We've got plenty of examples as to the diminishing of autonomy. Vax mandates are one of them. It's so incredible to me that the same cabal that has been talking about my body, my choice has completely rewound the narrative on that entire way of thinking. No, now it's your body, my choice. And that is one of the greatest offenses to me that I've ever seen right now, is the assumption that in the name of the supposed public good, I can be forced to accept an experimental drug injected into my body against my will for the benefit of other people. These are the same exact people that are saying that the mother should be allowed to murder a baby inside her womb because the baby is inconsequential and not an actual human being, because it's about her body and her choice. An incredible amount of acrobatics mentally you've got to go through in order to go from point A to point B in this argument. But again, it's about the diminishing autonomy of the individual and their ability to make choices for themselves. We are systematically eliminating small business. Can anybody bring me evidence that you are supporting the idea of independent small business after what we've witnessed over the past 18 to 24 months? We have gotten, it's funny because over the past 50 years we've had this, there's been sort of a mantra, typically among the liberals and the progressives, that have said, well, the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And up until the last couple of years, you've been able to say, well, that's because the rich keep doing the things that made them rich and the poor keep doing the things that made them poor. And for the most part, you'd almost be right with few exceptions. But now we are entering into a structure that is designed to eliminate the middle class. Okay? The middle class are meddlesome and troublesome. And I'll show you news that is occurring like right now that is going to show you the systematic erosion and decimation of the middle class. Small businesses are being destroyed. COVID was leveraged, the way we responded to COVID, the leverage we used to build the big businesses and destroy the small businesses is so apparent in so many places that if you haven't seen it, you're just simply not looking.
You know, this isn't brand new. This, Ronald Reagan, for instance, you have his shirt on. That started me graduating out of high school. I mean, jobs were going out of the country left and right with the NAFTA and...
Well, NAFTA was after Reagan, but yeah.
Yeah, after Reagan. That was Clinton. All of the trade agreements and even with Richard Nixon, with China and all the deals that he...
The globalization.
Okay, so what it looks like and sounds like to me is a new world order is in operation and being set up.
That's where we're going.
And being...
If you'll give me another 45 minutes. But they call it something different now. But they call it something different now. Just hold your horses. Let me have my way here. Vax mandates, the elimination of autonomy. Small businesses is another indication of the elimination of autonomy. Our ability to make decisions for ourselves. Watch this, the work ethic. The work ethic is also being decimated. We can prove it by virtue of the fact that we are literally paying people not to work and incentivizing them, promising them that if they'll just be good little subjects, we will make sure they have everything they, quote, need. Need is a very malleable term, by the way. Who knows what it actually means? It's completely subjective, isn't it? And therefore, we're talking about essentially from a social construct, work is being looked at now as a negative thing. How can I prove it? We have 11 million job openings and only 8 million people looking for work. This is an incredible disparity in the amount of work available and the number of people who are looking for work. We've got what we call, in November, we saw essentially a work walk-off, where over 4 million Americans walked away from their jobs and did not look for a new one. Remember, we don't call them unemployed anymore because they're not looking for a new job. That's why the unemployment numbers are so magically low. They are literally getting their cake and eating it too. They get to have the low unemployment numbers and have nobody working. Pretty cool. Here's a new one, and almost nobody knows about this. I had it confirmed today. But in the infrastructure bill that we just passed, did you know that there was a line in there that has been passed into law, signed into law in this country? Right now, it is law of the land. That by the year 2026, all new vehicles must be equipped with remote kill switches. And tracking. Black boxes, essentially. Okay. That means that any new car made in the United States or sold in the United States has got to have a remote switching capability that it's in the, you can read the law, but the government, a government entity, I do not know to which entity it has been prescribed, is given the right to kill your vehicle at whim at any time for any reason. That's not tinfoil hat stuff. It's already happened. Right? Anybody 24 months ago imagine we'd be talking about this? 2 lousy years ago. So, what is that? It's a reduction in autonomy. It's another chink in our ability to choose for ourselves, decide for ourselves. What happens when what you think becomes enough of a criminal activity for them to simply stop your ability to be mobile? Well, that's not so far-fetched, is it? Because now we're looking at essentially January 6th being a national day of infamy every year. So, and you didn't even have to be at the Capitol to be associated, guilty by association with those who were that day. This is not wild, off-the-cuff stuff. This is in the headlines, if you're looking for it, every single day. That domestic terrorism can easily be defined right now as someone who has even a percentage of the same mindset as those who actually were at the Capitol on January 6th a year ago. And we're one step away from that defining you as a domestic terrorist. We've got regulations that have come to pass that only the big corporations can afford. Now, I'm a good Republican. I'm an old conservative. I'm one of those guys that was always big business, yes, because it's big because it made good decisions and it stimulated the economy and it provided wealth for many, many people. But we're entering into an oligopoly. We're entering into a situation now where the big businesses literally have taken control of the controllers. Okay? And what we saw during COVID was that the absolute biggest businesses in the world doubled, tripled, quadrupled their net worth at the expense of almost every small business in America. Not just the restaurants, but every retailer, everybody that depends on moving merchandise or selling their services suffered while, and I'm just as bad as anybody, the Amazons, right? The Walmart Onlines, the big boxes that aren't even boxes anymore made more money than they'd ever made in their entire history. And we're essentially encouraging dependence and non-productivity. It's called a perverse incentive, but we're watching it happen. We're watching literally people pulled from productivity and pushed into dependence. And they're going quietly and willingly and happily because they don't know what the end of the story looks like. And you know what? Sometimes now, I don't even know if they did know if it would make a difference. Just don't take my smartphone away from me, please. Whatever you do, I'm happy. I can look down at it and get anything I want, communicate with anybody I want, get all the entertainment I want, get all the information I want. There's a really funny little cartoon out there on the internet. I've seen it a couple times. I couldn't find it today to bring it to you, but it's got two little bunnies sitting on a sofa. And one bunny says it's underneath it says, before smartphones. And one bunny says to the other, there's something I don't know. And the other bunny goes, that's too bad. Remember when you could not know something? And here's something I talked about with a friend of mine a couple nights ago. And okay, it's a little tinfoil hatty, okay? Just a little, but you got to cut me some slack. The very first object, other than the actual tree that held the secrets of good and evil, that held all of the mysteries of the universe from the dawn of mankind till now, was the smartphone. I mean, when you have a smartphone in your hand, you literally have the sum total of the entire human experience from the dawn of time in your hand. It's all there. Literally everything. You can get to the Smithsonian, you can get to the Federal Reserve, you can get to literally any database on planet Earth that has any data having anything to do with all of humanity since the dawn of time. Have you ever thought about that? The power that we give an 8-year-old? And then we say, be careful. The first one of those was the iPhone. Made by who? And what is the logo for Apple? An apple with a bite taken out of it? Really? It's got to be a coincidence. Okay, well, the next slide was actually going to be Tucker Carlson, all of our heroes for at least the time being. And we were unable to get the sound up because Tony was simply unable to do it through me remotely, and we tried real hard, but consequently we were 10 minutes late to start the thing, and we still don't have the audio. But this is Tucker Carlson's presentation from last night. Did anybody see it? A couple of you saw it. Basically, he is talking about, and I really wish, it was only 4 minutes. I edited it to just 4 minutes. But essentially, the biggest cities in the country right now are spending not millions, not hundreds of millions, but billions, with a B, on public housing designated for the homeless. Guess how much one unit costs? $500,000. The $300,000 were in Seattle. They're not doing so well in Seattle. But in LA, they're $500,000 per unit. And they're designated for those who are homeless. Now, who wants to be homeless? Okay. Also, a view of the spire, the thing, what do you call it, the dealio, the round thing up in the, and the bay, like they brag. They literally, it's one of the selling features of these free condos, is that they've got beautiful views, and they actually do. At the same time, the small businesses that were impacted via COVID are given literally less than 1/100th of the resources that have been allotted to those cities through the COVID relief funds, only in the form of loans. Can it be any more plain what the intentions are? You know, forget what people say. Look at what they do, right? I mean, words are cheap. But when we pay people to be homeless and punish them for producing, guess what you're gonna get? So the question is why, right? Why? That's the most important question. Why? I heard somebody say control.
It's part of the plank of communism is universal housing.
Well, it is. Oh, by the way, in most major cities right now, there are, if it hasn't already been passed into law, it's on virtually every city council's voting docket to eliminate single-family housing from being built. It's about to be against the law in most big cities to build houses for one family, right? So that's happening like right now. It's already happened in many major cities. What's that sound like? It sounds like reducing autonomy and the ability to make decisions for yourself. I'm not crazy. This is actually happening. Now, you know, the thing is, I had a conversation with somebody this week. I can't remember who it was, but when I grew up in the 70s. I was a kid in the 70s and turning into a preteen and all that kind of thing. And I grew up in the church. And back in the 70s, if you can remember, it was like really kind of in vogue in the church to talk about the end times and how they could come any moment. And we were looking for signs, and we'd find a little thing over there, and we'd go, well, that looks like it. And we'd talk about how bad it was going to be. And we were honestly, if you remember, if maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just me, but we were a little smug about it. We were kind of like, yeah, we're going to be just fine, and we're going to watch all those poor proletariat, ignoramus devil worshippers get theirs finally, right? And it's going to be, we'll be able to say, yeah, I told you so. What I didn't count on, and I didn't have any idea at the time, because I was just a dumb kid, I didn't know it would hurt this bad to watch the systematic destruction of such a potentially wonderful thing. Like we talked about last week, the United States has provided more comfort and life-saving apparatus and intention and compassion to the planet Earth, unlike anything humanity has ever seen before, and we are systematically taking it apart. We're taking it apart. So, why? Now remember, we talked about last week that we've got this perverse incentive. And here's tying into what we've talked about so far today. Rewarding people not to work is worsening a bad supply chain. This is really old news. This is, wait, that's today. So that's today. Remember now, the Supreme Court said that Papa Biden can't make us all get a vaccination, right? But say again? Canada. Oh boy, poor Canada is not doing well either, by the way, from a dictatorial standpoint. Holy moly. They're the Australia of the West. That's not good.
What's happening though, Mike, is Canadians have to be vaccinated to cross the border
Yes.
to come to the United States. And about a week after that requirement, the United States will be requiring that our guys be vaccinated to go to Canada.
Go there.
So they've essentially
Close the border to intercommerce. Yep, or interstate commerce, inter-country commerce. So look, severe economic bottlenecks. I'm just going to look at the highlighted parts with you. The vaccine mandates, remember we talked about that last week, threatening an industry that's already, for reasons you just stated, are at the edge of a cliff. Also because nobody is working, because we paid them not to. Remember, rewarding people not to work? Obstacle facing the industry is reporting people not to return to work. A shortage of talent, not just in trucking, but they're short, and this I've confirmed with several different sources, but they're short 81,000 drivers. By the way, FedEx is short 20,000 drivers, just FedEx. COVID-19 mandates are an added additional headwind to trucking companies, 72% of domestic freight. Supply chain, anyone? Can't take too long on all of these. Look here. Remember now, I talked last week about how the federal government has advised states on how to provide additional monies to individuals who don't wish to go or claim that they can't go back to work, even though the official federal benefits ran out in December, the beginning of December. Remember, they were advising states on how to use additional COVID-designated monies in order to channel them into the bank accounts of those who aren't working. Right now, even though there are still funds available that have not been dispersed, we've got lawmakers looking to spend more, new pandemic stimulus spending, preparing to ask Congress for substantial funding to address, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The ongoing, right? I'm not going to tell you that COVID-19 isn't real. I had it twice. It's not fun. But if it isn't over for all practical purposes at this point, it never will be. It never will be. And the lack of coherent common sense in directing policy with regard to COVID-19 right now is so upside down, inside out, and convoluted that it literally hurts to try and think about it. It's almost a physical pain. New funding, testing, vaccines, make sure schools have resources to keep themselves safe, although they can't account for almost a fifth of the money that has already gone to the public schools in the past 2 years. Lawmakers previously allocated hundreds of billions of dollars to these purposes. Where did the money go? Breakdown: $266 billion in pandemic education funds, highlighting $191 billion is still unspent. The $1 trillion Build Back Better plan needed to prevent the expiration of the child tax credits. Tens of millions of families poised to collect the largest payments yet in the coming months under the current temporary policy. And we're wondering what we should expect with regard to inflation.
Did you see today that the Republicans brought it up? A lot of this money that we don't know where it went is now being used to house people and fly people and loan illegal aliens money from the government to go wherever they want.
You remember about a month ago we were talking about $1,000 reparations to, and so they're doing it in a convoluted back doorway. Yeah, essentially, they're using COVID relief funds to do it. So, what else? What else we got? Oh, there's more to this one. Increased benefits from $2,000 to $3,000 for older children, $36 for younger ones, full payments to parents who don't work. Started to deliver payments monthly. A coming surge in benefits. Millions of parents are about to receive as much as $1,800 per child in a single payment. This must be a year ago. Nope, remember, this is yesterday. Yesterday. Not, I remember yesterday when trouble seemed so far away. No, like yesterday, like the day before today. $130 billion in coming payouts will exceed prior annual records. Millions more recipients than ever before will qualify for full benefits, ending the work requirement and incentive. Golly, it sounds like they don't want people to work. Because if you work, you have two things. You have identity and autonomy. You have freedom if you work. Full payments in 2021 to non-working parents. It revived work-free welfare. Benefits will surge to record highs in the months ahead, even without further legislation. And remember, they're seeking more pandemic spending. Now, here's what we love, right? We talked about this last week. Here's a more recent article that just came out a day or so ago, where if we spend more money, it will bring inflation down. Passage of the stalled Build Back Better Act will help fight inflation. Number of the programs that are attached to the Build Back Better, including the child tax credit, can help bring down inflation. We will throw money at inflation and beat it, even if it kills all of us to do it. If there isn't going to be any more money into the economy and the prices just continued, that exacerbates a problem. See, but there is going to be any more money in the economy. And what is it not attached to, remember? Prices are okay if they're attached to income, wages, right? But does this have anything to do with wages? Not at all. And wages are what give us productivity. You have to produce to get a wage. So here we have no productivity and free money entering this huge pool of money we already have laying here. The mega bill, reduce inflationary pressure and cut costs for families. How? By giving families more money that they can use to battle inflation. That's literally the rationale that's being used. Now, watch this. They're going to pay an average 3.25% or 3.5% almost percent raise to workers in 22. But there's a problem with this. The wage growth is still faster than the raises paid in the past 2 years. Watch this. Now, part of it is due to the fact that costs or prices are higher, and that employers need to compensate their employees in a way that helps them at least be able to pay their bills and buy things that they need, right? That's one thing. So, in other words, inflation is forcing employers to pay their employees more money because a happy employee is a productive employee. But more importantly, I think the bigger piece is about this race for talent. Talent in this world means a warm, breathing, carbon-based life form that can fog glass. That's talent. So job openings in the U.S. are near an all-time high. 4.5 million workers quit their jobs in November, just like we talked about. Employers have increased wages to attract and retain employees amid the demand for labor. 74% of the companies cited the tight labor market as a reason to increase their budgets for raises. The tight labor market. And we're paying people to not work. Do you remember the very first thing I said last week? The biggest problem, checkbox number 1, is to make sure that companies are competing with who? The government. Well, guess who gets to print their own money? That's tough to compete with that. But, yay, pay increases. The problem is inflation's better than 7%. In fact, if you count food and energy, you're looking probably close to 13% right now. So we are in double-digit inflation for all practical purposes. Increase wages by half that rate. So yay, you get 3.25% or 3.5%. However, the inflation is twice that. So you're literally getting a pay cut every single day that you work. Oil prices expect. This is all yesterday. This is all yesterday. Today's the 19th, right? Yeah. Oil prices expected to soar in 2022, as if it wasn't hard enough to get around. But wait a minute, hold up. Oh, don't forget. What does it hurt when fuel prices are high? What do you use fuel for? Cars. What do you do with cars? You drive them around and exercise your right to autonomy. What happened? Because it was like $2.99 and bam, overnight, yeah. We were just talking about that yesterday. And I don't know a correlation, but I do.
It's the ending of that big release that they did worldwide from their reserve.
Now, actually, that was only supposed to be good for a week and a half. And that was a month ago. So that flame burned out a long time ago. Pardon? It does have to be released and delivered. And by the way, that's not even very good oil. That's like really dirty, what do they call it in the oil that's sulfur. It's got a lot of sulfur in it. It's not the best stuff we've got.
Pardon? North Dakota's crude is actually yellow. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Federal Reserve's in deep trouble as it tries to handle inflation. That's always good to hear. And Rand Paul, it's only going to get worse, releasing concerning new report on soaring inflation. So we had a minute or two of happy news. Yay, the COVID mandate isn't going to work. But do not let that fool you. By the way, Elizabeth and I talked today about a backdoor way we've just discovered. They're going to, the vaccine mandate's going to happen whether you like it or not. He tried the easy way. President Biden tried the easy way. He just tried to say it into existence. There, it's done. But that didn't, I mean, it scared everybody, and it really did, it definitely damaged the supply chain, at least temporarily. But when that went down, it's becoming apparent that what they're going to do is essentially quietly threaten major corporations with some form of regulation if they do not enact a vaccine mandate on their own. I want somebody to explain to me how a redneck company like Carhartt is talking about requiring vaccines for their employees.
Well, I know that Starbucks today said they're going to.
They undid theirs today.
Yeah, they undid theirs today. They dumped their mask, which is
They did.
hopefully a good signal.
Yeah, I used to believe in those. By the way, Boris Johnson in England, everything. Who would have thought England would beat us in liberty? How ironic.
And we're masking up with masks made in China.
Oh, and that's the best news of the day. Yeah, all these masks that they're wearing in Congress have boldly printed across the front of them, made in China. Yeah, and also, I think I read today that the Biden administration is releasing, is it 450 million N95 masks for free for everybody? Is anybody in the medical profession, how long is an N95 mask good for? How long is it rated to be used? A few hours? Yeah, a matter of hours. And there's 350 million Americans. Do the math. Okay, so there are those who desperately want to bring this system, our system, to its knees. Now this is the gritty part right here. And this is probably the most important concept I will have discussed with you since we started. It is to be rebuilt. This is so important. It's to be rebuilt on a foundation called equity. Now look out, this is tricky. It has, up until now, been premised on a foundation called equality. Outstanding, thank you. Because you can't believe how many people have bought into the idea that the conflation of those two words means that they are the same. I have news. They are opposites, and I will show you in a second how directly opposite they are. Do you know what we call a foundation of equity? Starts with M. Marxism. That is literally the founding principle of Marxism, is equity. We'll talk about equity and equality in a minute. It empowers the few at the expense of the many every single time. Remember, we're talking about getting rid of autonomy. Right? You think that the people that are going to start living in public housing are going to have autonomy? Oh, no, 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 no. They will pay dearly for their free $500,000 condo, insofar as the fact that they won't be able to make any decisions for themselves whatsoever. The middle class is being destroyed systematically, and I'm sorry, but the Bill Gateses and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jack Dorseys and the, God love him, Elon Musk, although I think he'd separate himself from that cabal if he could, are going to do just fine. So here's what I want to show you. I share this with my classes. I want to talk about equity for a minute, because I cannot emphasize how important this disparity between these two words is. Socialism, as Reagan said, only works in two places: heaven, where they don't need it, and hell, where they already have it. What do we mean by that? In heaven, they do not need socialism because there is no scarcity, right? There is no need. There is no lack of anything. There's no shortage of anything. There's no reason to trade in heaven because you have everything you need all the time. Pretty good deal. Hell, they already have it, because hell has no reward, only punishment. And we could spend an entire night talking about the reward-punishment schedule, the behavioral schedule, the essentially the discussion that we pursue reward and avoid punishment, and there's positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. But in hell, there is no reward. There is only punishment. And we determined long, long time ago by B.F. Skinner that punishment does not work nearly as well as reward. You can cause people to pursue a reward or avoid a punishment to exact some kind of behavior from them. And what we've known for decades is that reward works every time and punishment works seldom. Because punishment slows down behavior. Reward motivates behavior. Really important distinctions. So pick your poison. We call it equality. Now, what does equality mean? We call it equity. What does equity mean? We have been told over the past 2 years or so, gosh, everything's so recent. It's hard to believe that all this has happened so fast. We have been there's an attempt to convince us that these two things are the same. However, equality means opportunity. This means that nothing stops you from achieving your full potential, doing what you're capable of doing autonomously based on your free choice, right? However, equity, wait for it, what does that mean? Outcome. Now this goes way back. Remember outcome-based education in the 80s? Any of you? No Child Left Behind? Sounds good, right? At the expense of what? Everybody else. All of the others who had embraced equality and opportunity were now forced to live under a system that was premised on equity and outcome. So this idea isn't new. The unmasking of it is. Call it what you will. Capitalism, of course, is a pejorative term now. It means that you wear a black top hat and you smoke a cigar and you've got a monocle and you try to squash people who are a minute late on their rent. Everybody knows that's what a capitalist is because we've all played Monopoly, right? Capitalism, and I tell my students this at the beginning of every semester when we talk about capitalism and socialism, and believe it or not, I'm able to do this very even-handedly without any obvious tendencies towards one or the other. You've got to do that nowadays, not because it's politically correct, but because if you're going to embrace the hearts and minds of your students, they've got to believe that you're being intellectually honest with them. It's the only way to do this now. We used to take it for granted that all the students that would come into a college classroom or a high school classroom would be readily embracing the tenets that made this country what it is. No longer. They, by default, eschew them pursuing some alternative that they think is going to be better and more utopia-like. So capitalism, I have to explain to them, is what every living human being is. Ocasio-Cortez is a capitalist. Bernie Sanders is a capitalist. Karl Marx was a capitalist. Lenin was a capitalist. Hugo Chavez is a capitalist. Do you know how I know they're capitalists?
Oh my God.
Watch this. It's even simpler than that.
They climb the ladder.
They do.
It's even simpler than that. Ready? They all take what they have and attempt to make more with it. Not more of it, right? Because we trade up. How do I know we trade up? Because if we didn't trade up, we wouldn't trade. Who benefits when two people trade? Both people, obviously, or the trade wouldn't have occurred, right? Who doesn't trade? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't trade? Oh, don't even get... Yeah, right, talking about the evils of capitalism, right on the front of it. Isn't that great? Yeah, Bernie Sanders has how many mansions? But I don't even want to get wrapped up in that. It's 4 or 5. That doesn't even matter. The fact of the matter is, there's never been a human life in history that has ever been born and survived to the age that they can make their own decisions who has not been a capitalist. All a capitalist is a human who takes what they have and makes more with it in order to somehow survive the constant current of life, trying to push them over the waterfalls to dash themselves on the shoals below. It's what we have to do in order to stay alive and to maintain our status as a species. You have to be a capitalist. Now, how do we have socialists then? right? There are no socialists. Did you know that? There aren't any. There are no socialists. What there are people who advocate socialism, right? If they were honest, they'd admit, yeah, I'm a capitalist, but I don't think you should be able to be that. I think that I should be able to make decisions using what I have to make more with it every day, but be able to dictate to you that you take what you have and I decide what you do with it, whether you can make more with it or from it or because of it, or less even if I so choose. But no one can be a socialist. Have you ever even thought about that? You can't be one, but you can advocate for it. The ultimate intellectual dishonesty. So capitalism is like not only a compliment, it's like a statement in fact. You can't look at someone and say, you dirty capitalist, and they go, well, thank you very much. I mean, obviously, I'm living and breathing. What are you? Clearly, the representation of equity is then socialism, ensuring that, to the best of your ability, everyone's outcome is always the same. Socially, academically, financially, economically, in every possible way, the outcome has to be the same. The problem with capitalism, does anybody know what the only problem with and it's a big problem. What's the only problem with capitalism? Well, they're going to get left at the bottom no matter what, because ever since the fall of man, things have been tough all over. It's just part of the universe's properties. We're not all the same. In fact, I don't want to jump ahead of this. Thomas Sowell, brilliant Thomas Sowell, has an amazing interview with Brett Baer, I think it is, a couple years ago, where he talks about this ideal of socialism and everyone having the same outcome, the same result, regardless of what they put in. He says you could take identical twins in the same family with the same parents, brought up the same exact way, fed the same exact food, trained in the exact same moral code of ethics, put to bed at the same time, got up the next morning at the same time, put in the same schools, and they come out completely different. And wait, if identical twins raised by the same parents, fed the same food, sent to the same schools, put to bed at the same time and raised at the same time the next morning, if they turn out different, well, how in the world is a population of disparate, autonomous individuals supposed to have any hope of achieving even close to the same outcome? Yet that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? That's the stated goal, and I'll prove that too. So the problem with capitalism is we can lie. We're good at lying, and lying screws up capitalism. Telling a lie, misrepresenting truth is the only way capitalism can run ashore and not work. And we do that, and we do that because we haven't learned that typically the long-term effects of lying tend to be some sort of punishment to the liar. The short-term effects may be somewhat of a reward, but the long-term typically is a punishment, and we don't ever learn that lesson because we keep doing this. But watch this. The problem with socialism, it completely eliminates motivation because you're not operating in your own autonomous self-interest, making free choices in socialism, are you? So it removes the reward-based motivation, and it introduces a thing called moral hazard. Everybody know what moral hazard is? Moral hazard is a lack of incentive to guard against risk when you're protected from its consequences. In other words, if you can make decisions and the results of those decisions don't affect you at all, one way or another, positive or negative, you will fall under the trance, the mesmerizing power grab of moral hazard, because you'll be playing essentially Russian roulette with someone else's resources. And when all things go awry, it doesn't affect you at all. The 2007 and 8 global debt crisis is a perfect textbook example of what happens when people act under moral hazard. Watch this. Nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as they spend their own. Nobody does. Nobody uses their other people's resources as carefully as they use their own. If you want efficiency and effectiveness, if you want property to be utilized, you have to do it through private property, not someone else's property. And that, of course, was the amazing Milton Friedman, who famously said that. So, mandated equity is a universal impossibility. It is impossible. Yet it is literally what all of the people in power right now are striving for. Now, we're gonna finish up here with these last few points I want to make. The environmental agenda. Watch this. This Build Back Better agenda, which had, I don't remember how many billions in it earmarked for environmental regulations and mandates and all these kinds of things, under the guise of environmental progress, they would call it. This is a direct quote. I see the Build Back Better agenda as a historic opportunity that we may not see ever again. Now, this meme, we may not see ever again, this being an opportunity, watch for this in at least 3 different places. 1, the Build Back Better agenda. 2, COVID. 3, climate change. Watch these things and watch the commonality that they all share, the thread that runs through all of them. The other thing I want you to notice, and it's going to, for the most part, be highlighted in the darker color. Is that red? Does it show up red there? Watch this. Closing gaps in racial and gender equity. Watch, there's that word, equity, right? The infrastructure bill could be the strongest ever U.S. climate act. Watch this, creating, now what's in brackets are mine. I put that in there. And by the way, one of the things I teach my kids is that capitalism creates things, creates jobs in order to make things. Socialism creates things in order to make jobs. Big, big difference. Look here. Stated right here, creating 506,000 to 744,000, kind of specific, isn't it? New jobs in 2030. That is making things in order to create jobs. 3,600 to 4,800, watch this. It's going to improve air quality. And I did the math here just because it looked fun. So we're talking about doing this infrastructure bill to avoid 3,600 to 4,800, not deaths, premature deaths, whatever that might mean. I don't think anyone can define that. By the way, that translates into 0.00001% of the U.S. population. So yeah, let's pass this $5.6 trillion bill for the benefit of that fraction of our population and 100,000 to 136,000 asthma attacks, which of course is 0.0004% of the population. That's not even death, that's asthma attacks. The infrastructure bill, generating hundreds, watch, there it is again, generating jobs, creating jobs in order to make things. Directing significant funding to disadvantaged communities. There's that equity problem again. Infrastructure bill, $1 trillion, environmental justice. Here's a new phrase. These are environmental justice issues. White House has developed an environmental justice framework into communities impacted by environmental injustice. It builds from an environmental justice framework. It's an emphasis on environmental justice, equity, and civil rights. I've directed every office within my agency to prioritize and focus on environmental justice, our policies or our enforcement, racial justice, inequities, environmental racism, systemic racism, environmental justice, systemic racism. Are you beginning to see a common thread? The Green New Deal, remember way back, I'm old enough to remember like 3 years ago when we were talking about the Green New Deal. Well, it was about green, right? It was about to make the world a better, cleaner, more environmentally friendly place. Well, it didn't take long for the spokesperson for Ocasio-Cortez, the author of the Green New Deal, to actually say this. Ready? Do you guys think of it as a climate thing? Because we really think of it as a, wait, how do you change the entire economy thing? This is the spokesperson for the author of the Green New Deal. Would transition the U.S. economy entirely away from fossil fuels within 10 years by simultaneously providing a federal jobs and health care guarantee. That's equity, people. Advance social, economic, racial, regional, and gender-based justice and equality and cooperative and public ownership. Public ownership. How autonomous does that sound? Doesn't that just make you warm and fuzzy inside, thinking of all your private property? Now, watch Prince Charles. This guy, you have no idea. Maybe you do, but this is 2009. I just threw this up because it's fun. In 2009, he claimed that we had 8 years to save the planet. It's 2022. Carry the one. So, okay, he was slightly off on that. But just remember Prince Charles, because there you go. Okay. So this is what it's all about. This is why we are systematically destroying our economy. On our own. All by ourselves. And on purpose, we're doing this. We are not separate from this. We are part of this. The Great Reset is an actual thing. Okay? I've got a headline coming up from no source other than National Review that is essentially titled, "Too Bad This Isn't a Conspiracy." Because the authors of The Great Reset are the World Economic Forum. They're meeting right now. Yes, they are. Davos. Davos, right. Right, yeah. This is actually a thing. Now, watch this. This is out loud. This is not the quiet part anymore. This is happening today boldly through PA systems. We need a form of socialism calling for countless socialist and progressive plans, policies to align with investment in people and the environment. The longer-term perspective is about rebalancing economies. Now, wait a minute. Are we going to bring Haiti up to USA, say, circa 2018? Which is easier? But see, if you embrace the concept of equity, that's the only way you can do it. No child left behind the smart kids. The pursuit for global equity is what is going to destroy the United States. And I'm sorry, there just aren't enough like-minded, conservative thinking, republic-minded, no, I didn't say Republicans. I said republic-minded individuals that can stop this. There aren't enough. By the way, they keep talking about how Republicans are threatening democracy. Well, yeah. Democracy is a terrible idea. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for lunch. It's a terrible plan. It's mob rule. This idea of a republic, a representative republic, revolutionary and so successful, as proven for literally centuries now. Well, let's take it apart. We need policies to align with investment in people and the environment. We need to rebalance economies. That means take the top and bring it down. Watch this. Coronavirus pandemic has created an important opportunity. Remember I said watch for that word. Watch for that thinking, that mentality. That means now. That means now. It doesn't mean 2 years from now. It doesn't mean a year from now. COVID's gonna run out. COVID's gonna play itself out eventually. Okay, it just is. That dog is not gonna hunt at some point. Climate change is next. Now, I've got a presentation I give my students. It takes a whole hour to do, but I've got PowerPoints showing how literally every single, did I say every single? I mean, like, every single prediction made by a climate change advocate has been wrong for 50 years. They literally have been right 0 times, not 1 time. Okay? Yet here we are. Here we are. Here we're still doing it. We're still listening to it. And Ocasio-Cortez herself said, like, we're all going to be dead in 10 years. And I've got interviews with college students who flat out believe it. They're terrified. They have nothing to live for. Why is the suicide rate among teenagers going through the roof, other than the fact that they haven't seen anybody's face in 2 years? Because they truly have been convinced they have nothing to live for. It's futile. It's pointless. They believe it. That's why I show them this presentation I've created. Y'all, they're wrong. They're just wrong. And the worst part is they know they're wrong. Do you really think Prince Charles thought that we'd be done by 2019? 2018, whenever it was? I got some that'll just blow your mind. I got some people who have said we have 500 days. I've got one that says we have a year and a half before the polar ice caps are gone. Like, no, just no. I mean, if we fell into the sun, they would last longer than that.
That's a part of the strategy, though, is to create the hopelessness.
It is the part of this. You're absolutely right.
The inflation rate is to also contribute to the hopelessness.
And watch this. When there's hopelessness, what else have you lost? Autonomy. I can do nothing. I am pointless. Any endeavor I take for myself is meaningless. Why try? Give me my phone. It is the truth. No, you're 100% right. Look here. Coronavirus created an important opportunity. I know we're over like crazy, and you won't offend me if you leave, but I do need to get through this. Enact a radical transformation of capitalism would likely not have been made possible, without the pandemic. Oh, God, it's so hard not to make the logical jump to a deliberate plan. It's so hard not to do that, right? I mean, at some point, intellectual honesty is to go, yeah, obviously, that's what happened. You know, at some point, you're just stupid not to think that. Don't let Obama's chief of staff, the Godfather of Chicago. Don't let a crisis go to waste. Who was that? Rahm Emanuel. Thank you. There you go. We are all trying to. Okay. Golden opportunity. Look, there it is. Opportunity never. Remember opportunity and outcome? Here's your opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Make people more receptive to big visions of change. It's an opportunity we have never had and may never have again. Sounds like desperation to me. Sounds like we'd better do something even if it's the wrong thing to me. Great Reset. There it is. National Review. The great William F. Buckley. If only it were just a conspiracy. The Great Reset now being proposed by the World Economic Forum really exists. How do we know it exists? Because it's their front page on their website. I'll show you in a minute. The WEF, World Economic Forum, matters, and so will its Great Reset. What's striking about the Great Reset is not the scale of its vision, how often and for how long we've already been hearing, in one form or another, variants of its main themes. What are they? The need for a drastic action on, climate change. Stakeholder capitalism. I dare say many of you don't know what that means. There's two kinds of capitalism, two kinds of thinking when you're running a business. That is shareholder or stakeholder. It's a big debate. Milton Friedman eventually fell on the side of a shareholder, those who have actually got skin in the game, who have invested their, time, effort, and knowledge into this endeavor. They are the primary recipients of any benefits that the company may see. However, stakeholder means anybody who's affected by the company in any way. Customers, neighbors, politicians, other companies. So this move from a shareholder to a stakeholder theory is extremely socialist. It means that your company can exist not only for you, but it must exist for everyone that it affects. That's the shift in thinking here. Definancialization Financialization, moving away from the Anglo-Saxon, God help us, model, thinking of the planet before we travel, shop, or even eat. The Great Reset, world leaders' radical plan to transform the economy. Use climate change to justify liberal policy changes. And that's not liberal like you're thinking. That's like liberal all the way. New proposal, Great Reset, most ambitious radical plan the world's ever seen or seen in more than a generation. Reset the global economy. Instead of traditional capitalism, high-profile group said the world should adopt more socialistic policies. These are not socialists saying this, remember. Such as wealth taxes, additional regulations, massive Green New Deal-like government programs. Every country, U.S. to China, has to participate. Every industry, from oil to gas to tech, has to be transformed. We need a great reset. In all aspects of our societies and economies, they have to be revamped. From education to social contracts and working conditions. Massive new government programs, far-reaching policies comparable to those offered by the socialists such as Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez. A new form of socialism, policies to align with investment in people and the environment, rebalancing economies. The coronavirus pandemic has created an important opportunity, there's that word again, to enact their radical transformation. I could go on, but there's Prince Charles. Watch. It's an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. A golden opportunity, if you will. This is new news. This is the quiet part out loud, finally. Now, everyone in this room has kind of, for the last probably 20 years, right, had this sort of inner sense that somewhere this has kind of been bubbling and threatening, but not so much so that you had to pay attention to it. It took 2 years for it to go from there to here, just 2 years. It took 2 years to destroy the American work ethic. If you could have told me 2 years ago that we would pay people to stay home and they go, okay, I never would have believed you. That's not how we got here. But we have so effectively forgotten how we got here. In fact, in many cases, taught the exact opposite 1619 Project, that this is what we get. Now is the time for a great reset. By the way, that is the World Economic Forum's front page. This is the point right here. 3 main concepts. The first, steer the market towards fairer outcomes, read equity. Second component, ensure investments advance shared goals. Autonomy? No. Equality and sustainability. Equality? No. The third is to harness innovations of the fourth industrial revolution. That essentially means to take all intellectual property from anybody who owns it and make it public property. That's what that means. It means you do not even get to own your own ideas, because if to do so would be to cost the public good, a potential good that they're entitled to, simply by virtue of the fact that they're alive. Now, I'm going to leave you with this, because this is horrifying and so perfect. Danger, COVID, global warming, racism makes the handing over of all power to a small caste seem like the natural and unavoidable condition of survival. Written in 1949 by George Orwell. We're using it like a manual. I mean, we're turning the page to see what happens next. Or worse, what to do next. We're looking to see what happens next, but they're using it to determine what to do next. And that is the point of why we're experiencing this chart that I showed you last week. Why the prices are going up, 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 and wait, up, 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 up. Why the gross domestic product is going down, 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 and demand is going up, up, up. It is to systematically dismantle this economy. Now, the last thing I will say, and I told you, I promised you I'd give you my opinion. I said last week that if you can pay people back money you've borrowed in current currency, you're actually going to pay them back less than they loaned you. Because if you borrowed from them in 2010 and you pay them back in 2020, you're paying them back with dollars that are worth far less than the dollars they gave you in 2010, right? It's technically good to be in debt in inflationary times. Or wait, we could also say if you're in debt, it's good to create inflation. Ooh. Well, I mean, if you can be in charge of creating inflation, and if you are in debt, $28 trillion, why not create inflation? Okay, that can work a little. The problem is you're assuming that the people you've loaned the money to are stupid. That is a very dangerous assumption to make, because they might be, but they might not be. And I'm not the first guy who thought of this. In fact, I heard somebody propose this a couple years ago, back when China wasn't quite the threat they are to us right now economically. And I've got news for you. China can sustain themselves right now. They don't need us. We're a rounding error for them now. Remember last week I said we could go to sleep one night and wake up the next morning and everything will be different? This is my opinion. If China chooses to discount U.S. debt by selling it at a fraction of its actual value, even if it's a sizable fraction, let's say 90% of its value, and other countries will say, I'll take that risk. I'll buy that U.S. debt from you at 90 cents on the dollar. Do you have any idea what that will do to the confidence in the U.S. dollar? And it won't take days, it'll take hours. And we will wake up and there will be no such thing as a U.S. dollar anymore. China and Russia have already disconnected the dollar from petroleum. The petrodollar for them doesn't exist anymore. They're ready for this, both of them. And it used to be that we assumed this would never happen because of what they call economic mutually assured destruction, which was if one of us did that to the other, then it would hurt them so bad that it would hurt us by extension, because we technically have thought we've always needed each other as trade partners. We can't survive without each other. That's no longer the case. So my thinking is that we are systematically creating our own inflation because we want this to happen. Because this is the quickest, fastest way to bring us down through a model of equity to align ourselves with what pretty much the rest of the world leaders are suggesting has to happen, one way or another. The little addendum is, what if, I don't know, but what if China and Russia have actually colluded with the hardest core progressives and leadership in our country right now and essentially said, look, after the November elections, you're through. There's going to be a red wave that no one's ever seen the likes of before. And that will happen. I'm telling you right now. If there's an election in November, the Democrats are done. They're done. And I'm not being Pollyannish. I mean, the numbers will wash over them. Plus, they're retiring. Like 28 of them have retired already. Okay? There's no hope for Democrats in November 2022. None. So, either they get done what they've got to get done before then, or China and Russia will do it for them. That's my opinion. And it's based on, I think, data points. And I think history. And I think valid, rational assumptions. But it's by no means a prediction. You understand there's a difference, okay? But it makes perfect sense to me that is the logical conclusion to what we're watching right now. And it perfectly explains why we're deliberately driving inflation through the roof. It's the perfect nefarious scenario. And it'll achieve what the World Economic Forum has pretty much demanded we do, because they can't say, Haiti, get up! Sudan, get up! They can't do that. All they can do is say, America, down, boy, or else. And I don't see where we can get through an election without that happening. It might also explain why they're pushing H.R. 1 right now, or the likes thereof, the horrible bastard stepchildren of H.R. 1 that they're trying to push through Senate right now to try and eliminate voting rights for those who are legitimate voters by diluting their vote by illegitimate votes, right? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir literally right now. I mean, I don't know how many of you sing, but that's, I mean, clearly what they're trying to do. If they're going to have an election, it can't be a legitimate one. And I'm not going to go back to 2020 and talk about that. It's pointless at this stage. But I do know that they cannot afford to have a legitimate election. It just can't happen. They've worked 70 years doggedly, 4 generations to get to this point right here. Reagan was a road bump. Trump was a road bump. Cinnamon and Manchin, they're little road bumps. But it's for all the marbles this time. And that's how it ties in to what we're doing, as best as I can tell. That's all I got for you. I'm sorry we went way over. It's been an exciting, and then what, right? Yeah, and then what? Boy, I have no clue. I really don't. I just...
The one thing I see is people are waking up.
They are waking up.
Because the church couldn't even imagine this much evil.
No. Like I said, well, in the 70s, we're like, it's going to be so much fun watching them go down. And I'm like, no, it's not fun. This isn't fun at all. I'm horrified. I lose sleep. I'm a pain in the neck to live with. Don't nod so vigorously. A little self-effacement here. I thought maybe.
Just ask a very quick question. And I know you realized last week you're not an investor or anything like
Right.
that. But just a question. With the potential and very, very likely happening of a major dollar crash due to all of this such, does it make sense to keep putting money into stocks and investments?
Well, you saw that last week I shared Michael Burry's prediction that we're looking at the mother of all bubbles right now. Like equities and stocks are, they're overinflated by a magnitude of like the likes of which we've literally never as a civilization seen before, by a magnitude of 2. So no, I think it's probably a terrible idea. Honestly, and I think about this all the time because I'm not a big investor. I'm an economist, and economists and investors are rarely the same people, oddly enough. Maybe it's because economists know just enough about it to go, I'm not going near that. But I like land as long as we're allowed to keep it. Property, land, property, physical things with some permanence, right? That has, watch, innate value. Like innate value. You can grow stuff on land. You can make stuff out of the things you get out of land. You can walk around on land. You know, you can get water from it. You can do all kinds of cool things with land. I don't like anything else. And I know that sounds really stupid, but the cryptocurrency it's essentially just as imaginary as dollars. You know, and we talked about gold and precious metals, and if you hustle with it, you can make some money now if you know exactly what you're doing and you're incredibly savvy and a little lucky. But at the end of the day, if you're going to buy a loaf of bread with gold, how do you do it? You know, you just shave off a sliver and go, here, how's that? I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Well, that was like the pieces of paint that never really took off, like where they had it was a coin and it was almost like perforated.
Cut it into little pieces. Yeah, that's why they called it that. Of course. And it can't work because the valuation of that in reference to any other commodity is so vague and subjective that I don't even know how you would. Now, if you want to store your money in a place that it'll probably be safe 1,000 years from now, gold's a pretty good idea. But I'm not going to be there then. So it doesn't help me, right? So I still don't see the point.
I'm a student of economic history, or, fascinated by it. But after the Civil War, we had the Gold Consumption Act. I mean, Lincoln walked around literally with guns pointed at people saying, this is money. And after the Civil War ended, they had the Gold Consumption Act. And all we really need to do to get ourselves out of this is fix our currency to a commodity or basket of commodities. And the other thing that I cannot seem to fathom, I'm starting to get it because I'm starting to understand how personalities are profiled and people get into value conflicts. But there's no reason why the state of South Dakota can't form its own state bank. North Dakota has one. My understanding is Minnesota has something similar like that. But if we had at least a state bank, we could stem
an independent parallel economy.
Now you got it.
Yeah.
So we could at least stem it because South Dakota is a welfare state. North Dakota, in their legislation for their state bank, says the following, that the state bank can lend to the legislature for whatever reason.
Yep.
So we're no longer handcuffed to the federal government in this constant complacency that we always get forced on. And the last topic is, I think you guys know, is MacArthur Foundation is here in town. And if you guys don't know what it is, I got a packet. It's at Citizens for Liberty and Wingnuts. I drop it off there all the time. But I'm deeply concerned that what happened is they took the war on drugs, which is an unconstitutional war, it's unconstitutional, period. Back in the 20s, they had the respect to the Constitution to pass an amendment for prohibition. But now we have a bunch of addicts, and now addiction's being treated as a mental health issue. This flew through the state of South Dakota in 2013 under Senate Bill 70. But those closet communists were sitting there waiting, and they're in our jail system. And now the MacArthur Foundation, through the Safety and Justice Challenge Grant, has a network. So wherever you saw these riots and all this other stuff, these were actually people from jail, such as the Kyle Rittenhouse. Milwaukee received a Safety and Justice Challenge Grant. It's in LA, it's in Las Vegas, it's everywhere. But when it comes to the 22, this election coming up, you're going to see this network activated, and it's not going to be pretty this go around.
They can't have an election, and if they do, it can't be real. It can't be. They can't afford it. That's my point. And every time I try to see around that possibility, it runs into reality. They have been so patient. They have played such an effective long game. It was Andrew Breitbart famously said that conservatives have been fighting the political war, which is downstream from the social war. And they've been fighting the social war and winning and winning and winning and winning. And those waters now have gone downstream and they are here. And it's too late. Those wars are lost now. And we're still fighting we're lower taxes, less regulation. No. How about men are men and women are women? Let's start there. Let's just start with the fact that there are two genders. I'm good with that. Let's start somewhere. But they won all of the social wars, and we didn't. I mean, I know people that, what's it got to do with you? Don't worry about it. Just get up and go to work every day. It's not a big deal until it is. And now the very definition of words that have stood 10,000 years is not only in question, but it's literally turned on its ear. It's the opposite of what it meant before. Look at equity and equality. They won.
And it's to make the jails more equitable. They're reducing the jail population by 25%. There's a bunch of junkies and homeless people out there. And boom, they're coming in and they're, providing the housing. It's nuts. They're really smart.
Well, and this is also not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. George Soros has personally funded many district attorney races all over this country. The guy in L.A., gosh, I can't think of his name all of a sudden. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, that he literally has decriminalized almost all of the felonies.
Did you see what he did with the transgender, the 26-year-old transgender male that says he's a female and raped a 10-year-old girl? Okay, now
I don't know.
Yeah, now they can sit there and say that, well, you get to pick your gender.
Right.
He's allowing him to pick his age.
That's right.
Well, see, that's the point. When words have no meaning, then there's no meaning, period. You can't communicate meaning without words. And when words lose their meaning, there's no communication. And without communication, there's no autonomy either. So, at this point, it's a fruitless endeavor to keep talking about it. But
So we can't fix this.
I don't think. I think we've done all the slowing down we can do.
But it's ultimately good and evil. God.
That's where we're okay. And whoever wants to leave can leave, but I got to say this.
Yeah. Get there.
I'm a student of behavior. I'm a hardcore behaviorist. It's hard sometimes for Christians to tie that into Christianity, but it's not that hard. Believe me, I can handle myself. But basically, We all engage in self-interested behavior because that's where rewards are found, is where we tend to do more of that which is rewarded and less of that which is punished. That's normal, natural behavior. It's how we were programmed. It's innate. It's in our DNA. To do otherwise, we would cease to exist as a species. If we pursued punishment and avoided reward, we would have been gone like after 4 days. So it doesn't work. Therefore, it's been often attributed to Albert Einstein. I don't think it's terribly fair because he was actually a smart guy, and this is a stupid thing to say, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result. That's a terrible, terrible, terrible definition of insanity because we've all done it and experienced the fact that that's not true at all. You can do the same thing over and over again and eventually experience a different result. Why? Because the environmental conditions change. You keep doing the same thing, and the humidity may change, the temperature may change, the people around you may change. If you hit something hard enough, long enough, eventually it'll break, right? I mean, that just makes no sense at all. Albert Einstein never said that. I will tell you, however, what the definition of insanity can logically and reasonably be considered, and that is engaging in voluntary, maladaptive behavior. Engaging in behavior that is bad for you constantly is insane because it goes completely against our entire gestalt, our worldview, our ethos, that which God has made us unique from all the other animals. We can't consistently engage in maladaptive behavior and continue to live, not only as individuals, but as a species. We would not be here. What we're witnessing right now with this mass formation psychosis that has just recently been coined, the world finally caught up with the definition of real insanity. And the only way I can explain mass voluntary engagement in maladaptive behavior, and I never play this card, okay, because I just don't. But when all the other options have been exhausted and there's only one thing left, you got to go with it, no matter how weird it may sound. All that's left is spiritual. And I can say that freely, of course, because we're in a church and we're all like-minded and in one accord. But the world's not going to buy that. But you and I both know that's literally the only way to explain millions of people simultaneously in concert engaging voluntarily in maladaptive behavior. How is gay marriage adaptive? How many people do you make with gay marriage? How many human babies? Well, that's maladaptive. As a species, at least. And can we go on? So here we are voluntarily engaging in maladaptive behavior en masse, and the only way I can explain that, the only thing I got, the only way you could possibly, the only conclusion you can draw is that something beyond the known physical, psychological, personal, experienced universe that we all call the material world. It's got to be something different. And that's...
I was just going to say, if I've got things understood right the last couple of years, Agenda 2021 was the original plan. It was supposed to come to a conclusion in 2021 through Hillary.
And that was the road bump.
And Trump was the roadblock. My hope is in the Lord, but my hope, I feel like God used Trump, and that's a big possibility that still leaves us with a lot of hope. That, we alongside with the Great Reset is the Great Awakening.
Yes.
And
Sure.
that is going on.
Sure, I agree.
And I feel like
You see it.
God is
You do.
using that. God put Trump in at the very last minute to thwart that plan. What we're seeing now is that they had to do the Great Reset, is the reformation. They've had to go, oh boy, how do we get to our plan?
Right.
And so they are trying to rush it through, and we're all seeing it clear as day. Up until the last 2 years, we weren't really seeing it. Most of us were asleep and not seeing what was going on. We can see it.
And to complement and add to what you're saying, I would argue that the Great Awakening is not for the purpose of saving this world. I'd say it's for the purpose of saving souls. And I don't want to sound all Jesus-y about it, but I'm sorry, that's the only option. I mean, that's the only reason I think we're still here. And the only reason that and churches are falling by the wayside. They're going to hell faster than a lot of atheists I know. There are churches in Atlanta I know of personally right now that will not allow you in the door if you haven't been vaxxed. Churches. Faith-based, what? And so this awakening to which you refer, and I completely agree because I sense it, I feel it, I see it, I experience it, I talk to people, and they're like, what just happened? What's going on? Oh my goodness, aim me somewhere and make me do something because this is ridiculous. But I don't think that the task is to try to redeem this physical world at this point. I think that's a lost cause. And it is going to hurt because we live in it and we eat food off of it and we drive cars in it and we interact with people in it and those things are it's going to hurt. But we're here for a reason. And the awakening, I think, is to carry the message of hope to as many as will listen at this point. Yeah, and they are. And I think we have to capitalize on that. This church, and I hate sounding cheesy. I really don't dig cheese. But this is a miraculous little church. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And I did not go to church for 20 years because I got busted in the chops really hard by a church. I mean, so bad that it kept me out of church for 20 years. And here I am, and I've never felt as at home and like-minded with such a group as I have right here. And I love the fact that nobody knows how they got here. I mean, isn't that amazing? Nobody knows how they got here. They just, I don't know, I was minding my own business, offending nobody, and I found myself in this building with a lot of other people. Huh? And I don't want to bolt. And I've wanted to bolt from every church I've been in for the last 20 years. Sounds good. God, thank you for this group. Thank you for not only the hope, but the expectation that you've planted in each of us, and help us to let that expectation show through us in all that we do and say, and those with whom we interact in our endeavors, that you have us continuing in, even though it seems futile. Even though although it's a part of the world and it seems like it's pointless, you have a point. And you do have purpose, and you do have things that we need to do, and it's the only reason you've let us stay here through all this. It's the reason we're going to go through this pain, is to serve you and your kingdom and those that you still care for and hope to see. God, thank you for bringing these people together, and thank you for speaking to us through this forum, with this medium and this information that you've given us, God. Help us to use it to further your purposes, and to stop worrying so much about the world we're going to leave behind, or it's going to leave us behind, God. Just help us and give us comfort and assurance that every day is worth getting up and moving forward, God. Thank you for the task that you've given us, and help us to do it faithfully to you for others. In Jesus' name, amen.